All right, so this video will serve as an introduction to Chapter 4 on the topic of ethics in research. Here are the topics that we'll cover. We'll have an intro, that's this lecture. We'll talk about human participants in research. We'll talk about non-human subjects, those being animals, and other ethical issues and scientific integrity. And a quick limerick. Though it's taken us too many years, we're now oiling our ethical gears. Our consent is informed, our procedures transformed, and our labs have less blood and few tears. So, psychologists are interested in studying human beings at their best, at their worst, at their most vulnerable. And so psychology allows scientists to use the scientific method and examine topics like conformity, obedience, violence, fear, prejudice, sadness, pain. So how do you study such topics in a laboratory in a way that does not inflict any serious damage, physical or psychological, on your participants? Furthermore, many psychologists will use outright deception. Why? Because it's often the case that you can't reveal the true purpose of your study, because if you do, your participants might act differently and ruin the study. For example, if you are studying conformity and you are creating some situation to see if people will conform to the crowd, you can't tell people that that's the purpose of your study, because it will immediately ruin the experiment. So you have to lie. So you see here the plethora of ethical issues that arise when conducting scientific research on people. Some studies might hurt people physically. For example, if you study pain perception, you have to induce pain. Other studies might hurt people emotionally. For example, studies on fear or stress, if you have to induce fear or stress. Some studies might require that you lie to your participants. And some studies might require eliciting sensitive information from your participants. So it goes without saying that you, as a psychologist, if not careful, can do a lot of damage to innocent people, your subjects, your participants. Furthermore, many psychologists do experiments on animals. And animals have fewer legal protections than humans. However, I think most of us would agree that animals can feel pain. Animals can experience negative psychological states like fear or anxiety. So research on animals is another important and very controversial topic in the field of research ethics. So the goal of this chapter is to explore this difficult, thorny terrain, to acquaint you with some of the ethical problems that can arise when conducting research in psychology, and to talk about some of the rules and standards and regulations that have been erected over the years to deal with these problems. So, at this point of your research journey, you have come up with some topic that captures your curiosity. You've done some reading and thinking and contemplating about this topic. You have found some gap in the current knowledge, and you formed a hypothesis that maybe will fill that gap. Now, up to this point, it's been just you alone reading and thinking in the library, in your dorm room. But soon, if this study is to go forward, soon there will be sentient beings dragged into your study. And now you have on your hands a serious responsibility to treat those sentient beings, your participants, whether human or animal, in a way that adheres to ethical standards. So before proceeding and getting your hands dirty in the data and methods, you have to pause and consider, how will your study be carried out? And are there potential serious ethical concerns that have to be addressed? And this refers to the topic of research ethics. So research ethics is the responsibility of researchers to be honest and respectful to all individuals who are affected by their research studies or their reports of the study's results. And this process, in psychology anyway, is guided by the American Psychological Association, the APA, and they have guidelines and ethical principles for conducting research. And we'll talk about those principles later in this chapter. So for each research study, ethics will determine every step of that study, will inform every step of that study. So what measurement techniques will be used, how to select participants, which research strategies to use, which design to use, how to carry out the study, how to analyze the results, and even how to report the results as well. All right, so there are two basic categories of ethical responsibility. One is ensuring the welfare and dignity of participants and subjects in your study. So usually, participants refers to humans and subjects to animals because animals can't give consent. So you, the researcher, are in a position of power and control over your participants. And you have to make sure not to abuse this power. It is your responsibility to see to it that no harm befalls your subjects or participants. No physical harm, no emotional harm, and no psychological harm. However, your ethical obligations go beyond the humans and animals in your study. They extend to the entire scientific community and even beyond to the entire community, period. For example, your study will require some investment of time and money. So you have an obligation to do good science so that this time and money isn't being wasted. Furthermore, you have an obligation to ensure that the results from your study are reported honestly, because what you report can influence other scientists, the questions they ask, and the studies they run. Remember, the hypotheses that you form will be influenced by other studies in the field that you've read. And if those studies are bogus, if the findings are reported dishonestly, it can lead you to waste years of your life testing a bogus hypothesis. So you have an obligation to do good science and report your findings as accurately and objectively as possible.